And he looks at me and he smiles. And it was a strange thing. It was like he had known John his whole life, but John didn't know him. It was like, it was such an awareness. And he walks over and he raises his hand up and he lays it on my chest. And I have what most people would consider a near-death experience in my regression. I literally go to the other side and I'm in this pure white expanse. I'm feeling all this love and compassion. And I'm sitting there, I'm experiencing this whole oneness with God. This pure, there's no delineation. It's pure love. And then I come back and one of the first things I say is, it's all love. It's all love.
Today, we're talking with John Davis. John, welcome in. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you as well and to kind of meet your audience.
Yeah, we were talking before we got on camera, and I have such a passion for this man's story. You are known as John of New, which is a long story. I know a little bit about it, but I really would like to dig a little bit deeper into your experiences, into your past life experiences, and just share with our audience what you know that the rest of us would like to know as well.
Well, I love the way you asked that question. I think that we all know it. It's just a matter of us becoming aware of it again. My story is a very interesting one. I started off as a young Catholic boy, and after 19 psychics told me about a specific past life, I finally had a past life regression. And I remembered the life of John the Beloved Apostle, which I did not want to be that guy. I did not want to be the guy who who thought he was an apostle in a past life. And at the time that this all happened, I wasn't really sure of what reincarnation even was. So
how old were you at this point? And how did you know 19 psychics?
Well, I was, well, let's talk about the 19 psychics, because that's great. I was literally working Renaissance festivals doing a comedy sword fighting show called Hack and Slash. That's right. For those of you watching, I was that guy wearing tights and living in the woods with the hair like Fabio back in the day. And I was at a Renaissance festival in Ontario, in Canada. And I was at a friend's house at a party. And this woman kept staring at me from the other side of the room. And she's looking at me and she's looking at me. And she gets up and she walks across the room and she says, "You know, you walked with Jesus, right?" And I was like, yeah. But the weird part about that, when she said that, it was so bizarre and so out of the realm of what we were doing at the time. The words that blurted out of my mouth to her were, "Yeah, I did that." And I was like, it was so weird. It was so bizarre, because I was like, that makes no sense for anything I would say. I just blurted out, "Yes, I did." And I was just like, okay, what does that mean? Am I crazy? What's this about?
So do you feel like you just had an innate knowing? In other words, the higher self of you just said, "Oh yeah, that's what I did."
Yeah, that's exactly what I think happened. And the higher self is an interesting concept in itself. But when you look at it from the concept of the Trinity, which is, in Christianity, the Trinity didn't really come into play until 300 years after the crucifixion. But when you look at the concept of the Trinity, it's very interesting, because you've got the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. First of all, I'd like to say I don't think there's gender in God. So the male pronouns are because of a patriarchal time 2,000 years ago. But I think it's the God consciousness.
Yeah.
And then the physical world, the Son, is the physical world awareness. And then the Holy Spirit is our higher self consciousness, the part that's completely aware of all aspects of it, right? In Hinduism, they would call God the Sit, and we are the Sit Sat Ki, which is the individual sparks of consciousness within the one God. So I think what happens is that higher self that knows it all sometimes bleeds through into the physical world consciousness. But let me keep going, because I after she had done that, I kind of was like, okay, I'm out of here, I'm gone. And I go to the Renaissance Festival in Maryland. And I'm sitting there talking to a friend of mine who I had known for, oh my gosh, at that point, I'd probably known her 15 years. And never thought anything about her having any gifts or anything of that nature. And we're talking about, how's your year been? All of a sudden, out of the blue, she says, "You know, you were John the Beloved, right?" I mean, this is someone who I never even thought, had these kind of things.
Are you think you're being punked at this time? Like, are you looking around?
Yeah. I'm being punked. I'm being punked by God. I love that. Well, and it was like, okay, so the next week I was in my hometown of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which, I no longer live there because I was on the road full time. And I go down to the beach. I'm sitting there on the beach, and this woman comes over, and she's playing with her dog. And I start playing with her dog. And she starts saying the same stuff. And she's talking to me, and suddenly her voice changed, her demeanor changed, and suddenly she starts saying, John of old, John of new. I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. I'm with you. I've always been with you. And I always will be with you. And I'm like, and then she says, do you see me? And I said, no, because I was being that guy. No. She says, close your eyes and see. And I closed my eyes, and it was as if when I closed my eyes opened somewhere else. And my hands I was looking at the back of my hands on the ground. And I'm looking at it, and the sand is falling off of my face, and it's hitting the hands. And I look up, and there's these 2 feet standing there. And I look up, and the guy who I now call Jeshua ben Joseph is standing there laughing at me, literally laughing at me for dropping on my face. Then the next thing happened. I went to a holistic fair, and I'm walking past one of the areas where all the psychics are. Some lady stops her reading, runs out, grabs me. They're telling me you're John the Beloved. It was like spontaneous readings like this all the way through. And then finally I was like, no more. So during the same time, there was a very popular book out called The Messengers. It was about a guy named Nick Bunick who remembered being the Apostle Paul. So I had gone through all this thing, and I was like, okay, I want to now find someone who does readings like this, but I want to go in completely blind so they don't know who they're talking to. And I called up one of Nick Bunick's readers, one of the ones from that book. Tira Hatton was her name. And Tira Hatton was a certified psychic through the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which is better known as the Edgar Cayce Foundation. So I call up to set her appointment, and she answers the phone, and she says, hello. I said, hi, I'd like to set up an appointment. She says, oh my God, you're John the Beloved. I mean, it was.
I'm sitting here getting goosebumps. This is stunning.
Yeah, for me too. And once again, I was still denying the whole thing. So by the time 19 of them told me that way, I decided to go get this past life regression. But what the final straw was to get the past life regression was, I said, no more psychics. Don't tell me any more psychics. I want a direct message to me, right? And a buddy of mine gave me a book called Edgar Cayce on the Millennium. And I'm like, well, let's see what this guy has to say about the future. And I wasn't even thinking. Page 32, John the Beloved, his name shall again be John. And so I'm like, okay, I'll get the regression. So I end up getting this past life regression. Now, I'd like to say that, for some people, they get a regression, they get informations. For some people, they get snapshots, pictures. For me, it was a completely visceral experience. I was there. I could smell the air. I could feel the wind. And the conversation with the regressionist was the thoughts in my head. So it was like the consciousness had swapped place. So I'm there, she regresses me, and I'm standing on a beach. And it's a rocky shore, and there's boats there. And I am sitting here, and I've got all these ropes and things, and I'm tying them. And, now after reflection, what I was doing was repairing nets. I was fixing holes in nets. Right beside me was an old guy with a big gray beard, and he was literally holding on to a staff, like keeping him up. And the regressionist says, is there anyone with you? I said, yes, my father's here. I said, and he can't do the work anymore because his back is bad. So I do the work now. Right. So this is just the relationship between John and Zebedee. Right. So we're having this conversation. She says, so what's going on? And I turn and I say, people are running down the beach. People are running down the beach. And what I'm seeing in the experience was literally, water was there, shore was here, Zebedee was here, and people were literally running as fast as they possibly could down this beach. I turned to my left, and there's a crowd formed over to the side. I said, there's a crowd. She says, what do you do with that crowd? I said, well, I'm going to go see what that is. right? And I wander over to the crowd. As I get closer and closer to this crowd, I can feel this love, this pure, I mean, and to the point where when you listen to the regression, I am literally losing my breath as it's happening. And on my YouTube channel, John of New, there's actually a video called 2 Moments from My Regression. And this is one of the moments that's I'm talking about. And I get closer, I'm like, oh my God. And I say, I can feel him. I can feel him. And I get into the crowd, and there is this buddy, this guy behind me here, right? This is actually, I painted this painting in 6 months after the regression. And he looks at me and he smiles. And it was a strange thing. It was like he had known John his whole life, but John didn't know him. It was like, it was such an awareness. And he walks over and he raises his hand up and he lays it on my chest. And I have what most people would consider a near-death experience in my regression. I literally go to the other side and I'm in this pure white expanse. I'm feeling all this love and compassion. And in the regression, which, by the way, I cut out about 7 minutes of me moaning in the from the regression because I don't want to hear me moan. It was a little too weird. So I'm sitting there, I'm experiencing this whole oneness with God, this pure, there's no delineation. It's pure love. And then I come back and one of the first things I say is, it's all love. It's all love. And she says, what's the next most important moment? The regressionist. And the interesting thing was the next most important moment was feeling all my fears and anxieties. And the reason that was so important is because the physical experience is to experience our illusion of separation from God so that we can come to know that feeling more fully. Because you could never experience that love unless you felt its absence. And so we come into this world and we experience this illusion of fear, and you have all kinds of levels of it. You have extreme fear. You have, just a little fear of, maybe getting ripped off or something like that. And it's all these levels of fear, which then explains to me later on when people do have near-death experiences, why they talk about the past, the life review. They experience the life from their point of view emotionally and from everybody they interacted with point of view emotionally. So they're literally experiencing the many facets of love, of many facets of God. And to me, it was just so profound to realize that we're in control of our fears and anxieties. And if you go out of Christianity and over to Buddhism, Buddha says the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And there's a famous psalm in the Bible that has a couple really interesting key elements in it. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. For thou art with me, right? So first it says, at the end of it, it says, I shall fear no evil. I shall have no fear because you're always with me as one, right? Basically. The first part of it was the part that I find really interesting. It doesn't say the valley of death. It says the valley of the shadow of death, the illusion that we can die because life is eternal. And so I had this experience of coming back from that thing in that regression and experiencing why we're here is to experience this many facets. Then moving on into the end of that regression, that first regression, she says, how would you feel about seeing his death? Now, she didn't realize, to John of old, Yochanes ben Zebedee, as Jeshua would call him, Hannah, right? To him, there was nothing more important than Jeshua. Because the exact words I say in the regression is, he gave me a glimpse of everything, and now I have to be with him. And so it was like he showed me everything. So nothing else was important. And so she says, how would you feel about seeing his death? What she didn't realize, number one, he was the most important. But number two, in the regression, I was literally watching him walk away. So she thought she was leading me to the death of John. But what happened next, and it's the second thing that's in that video I talked about earlier, I witnessed the crucifixion in my first regression. And you hear me screaming and just wailing as I watched this man who meant so much to me on a cross in front of me. And it was devastating. And I can't watch that video, and I don't listen to the regression, but when I watch them or I do listen to them, I cry. It's just so powerful. But that's the past story. So now I'm into what I'm doing now, which is trying to bring those sort of messages of empowerment and present moment fearlessness to the world, so people can empower themselves and have that experience.
Let's go back a little bit.
Oh, please! I know I went long. I'm a verbose man.
I was fascinated. I was hanging on every word. When you're met with unexpected information, it can be disorienting. And,
Absolutely.
you find out, oh, the company you are working for and have loved is fraudulent or is going out of business because they stole a lot of money. Those kind of disappointments or
Yeah.
that kind of new information. What we're talking about with you is rattling you to the very core of your being. You're here on the planet, you're doing an interesting creative gig with other interesting creative people, clearly not really connected to your religion, which you were raised in.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you start getting these huge breadcrumbs or huge clues that there's something a whole lot more to your story.
Right.
And I think that, it's like, I'm so glad that you were talking to the woman on the phone because I'm thinking, he was just a really good looking guy and all these women were chasing after him, all
Oh,
attracted to his energy and that sort of thing. It's like, so it was great that you had that phone conversation. So she wasn't right next to your energy or
that's
seeing
why
you in
that's
the
why I did.
physical.
I'm a very critically thinking person.
Hmm.
And even after the regression, I went back searching for either ways to debunk it or to prove it.
Right.
And the first thing I saw in my regression, I looked down at my legs were bare. And I thought, okay, well, obviously not an apostle because they always wore robes. I discovered that what I was wearing was called a fisher's coat. It's when they fished on the Sea of Galilee, you wouldn't wear your long robes because if you fell over, they would pull you under.
Hmm.
So they would wear this tunic that was belted at the waist, and it was like a Galilean one piece, right? Um, then I looked over, and on the boats on the shoreline, the boat had a spire that came up on the front of the boat, and there was this C-shaped hook on the front of the boat, and I remember that visually, that C-shaped hook. Well, going back and doing a lot of research, I discovered what that C-shaped hook was when you would cast the net off the side of the boat, you would take the rope attached to the net and you would wrap it through this C-shaped hook. And it was like a pulley. You would use that to pull the net beside the boat. So I was verifying, physical things in the regression to prove that it was historical. So I'm like I said, I'm a very, very critically thinking person. And for me, this was the beginning of a journey of studying Christian history. And I'm fascinated right now with another YouTuber named Dan McClellan. He's a Bible scholar, and he does what he calls debunking or demystifying false information on the Bible, and that he's amazing because he's very well versed in what he's saying, and he understands the ancient languages and all that. And so the more I hear him speak, the more my whole history is validated because he's showing me that this book that everyone claims is infallible isn't, and it's showing me that I have this ability. So yeah, I'm a very critically thinking person, and
Yeah.
like you said, it did rattle me to the core, and I
So
ran away from it for a while.
how did you, that's very understandable. I think that anyone would, particularly in the culture that we're in right now, where we're so disconnected and we're
Right,
taught from being little toddlers to not expand your awareness and not trust that Holy Spirit that we're all walking around with.
right.
So how did the process go from I've got all these people chasing me down telling me this information about myself or supposedly about myself to having that past life regression? Then how do you integrate that? Because that just rattles your entire
You know, it
reality system.
it does. You're exactly right. It rattles everything, and for myself, it engendered a bunch of fear. I didn't want people thinking I was a weirdo, and
Oh,
there was like,
okay.
it was like this guy's, I was at Renaissance Festival, so I had, Buddhists and Hindus and Wiccans and, and now I'm going to say, yeah, I'm an apostle, in the middle of that crowd,
By
right?
the way, I know important people.
Right, right, right. So yeah, I really kept it to myself for a very long time, and literally tried to walk away from it many times.
I would imagine because now that you're integrating that information, I would imagine your senses are expanding a little bit. Are you getting flashes of knowing? Are you getting flashes of memory?
I love that question because there's a certain percentage of people who, once they have the past life regression, there's a certain percentage of people who have continual ongoing memories that pop up. I am one of those.
Yeah.
So, like, if someone says, "What did Mary Magdalene look like?" and this was the most recent one. What did Mary Magdalene look like? And I had a complete memory of clearing a table with her and just the two of us just laughing the whole time we were doing it. That's another thing I'll say. A lot of my memories involve laughter. And I think that's a fascinating thing, but I think on a very scientific level, there's a reason because, I talk about fearlessness and coming back to that fearless space. When our physical body stores air, it's because we're trying to create a reserve to run fast. Storing air is a product of fear. And if you're a parent, if you're a mom and you saw your toddler walking across the living room floor and they trip and they fall and they almost smack their head on the coffee table, first thing you do is go, you gasp for air, right? You fill your lungs up out of fear and you now have a reserve to run fast. So the moments that we are the closest to our higher self and the closest to feeling that love of God and all that is during a laugh, is in the middle of laughter. And it's because it's a joyful exhale. You're literally releasing all the air in your body. You have no fear in that moment. So you're literally feeling it. What most people miss is that in those moments, if they could just take a quick break and just acknowledge that that's my authentic self, my higher self right there. If they start doing that, what happens is you end up with this whole new awareness of your oneness with the source. And what's really interesting is for my own practice, I don't, most people talk about meditation. I don't do meditation in that way because the word meditation is so convoluted now. There's so many different methods and try. I do what I call sitting in love, where I go in my front room and I exhale, right? Now, I'm going to show you something, see if I can get to do this on camera here, right? I don't know if you can see the hairs rising and the bumps popping up all over. When I exhale, there's again. When I exhale, my entire body gets goosebumped. And the sole reason that is because I've acknowledged the fact that my connection with source is at the bottom of every breath. And so when I exhale, I'm just tapping into the oneness of God. And what's so fascinating is when you make it so simple, your world completely dramatically changes. In that very first regression, I literally said, it's so simple, we have a hard time comprehending it. And now, like, I go to the grocery store. And before I go into the grocery store, I stop and I release all my fears and anxieties with an exhale. And I walk in the store, and as I'm walking through, people do double takes and smile at me. It's like they're not used to someone who's feeling that or joyful that. And I always go back and, I aspire to be like that man on the beach who I could feel his love. And so that's why I do that, is I literally am aspiring to be like he was, right? Now, in saying that, Joshua ben Joseph was a man who found his divinity and was showing us ours. And the second you put him on a pedestal or raise him up above you as a God figure or a deity, you've now created a division in the oneness of God that keeps you away from the oneness of God.
You've lost the point.
Yeah, you've lost the point. Greater works than I have done, you will do. It is your faith that heals you. You can ask a mountain to move, and it'll move. Nothing's impossible for you. He washed his disciples' feet so he could prove he was no better than they. And even in the Bible, he doesn't call himself the Son of God. He calls himself the Son of Man. Well, the Son of a Man is just a man. And I have memories of him being frustrated. I have memories of him laughing. I have memories of him, being tired. I have memories of him as a man, but he understood his divinity. Here's where most people get lost. If two people are leaving for a trip to the same destination and one person leaves 2 hours earlier, is the person who left 2 hours earlier better than the person who hasn't left yet?
Oh gosh, I love that.
Yeah, they're not, right? But that person who's 2 hours down the road has seen more, experienced more. And if they're a beautiful, loving person, they're going to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, there's some pitfalls and challenges this way. If you do this, you can avoid all that. And so that's what Jeshua is, and Buddha is, and Krishna is, and Muhammad is. They're people who found this divinity, but the religions are just man-made structures around their stories to try to make sense of it. But it's all far simpler. It's all far simpler.
Yeah. So you must have started with baby steps, integrating this information, probably getting a whole lot of additional energies or memories from your journey. How did you get to the point where you had the courage to start saying, I might have a little something to share?
Well, as I said, I'm a very critically thinking person, and I know you see a couple books behind me here, but if you saw that wall,
It's
you would
all
know,
filled.
you would know I'm crazy, right? Because that wall is filled with every spiritual book that I have ever been able to find. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I studied everything I could, but what I found was by studying like that, I was able to find my own personal truth within all of it. I think we're on a personal journey. Each one of us. My mom, when I turned 18, she said, she had her master's degree in liturgy. First of all, she was head of liturgical doctrine at our Catholic Church. And for those of you who don't
That's
know
a
what
lot
that
of
means,
pressure.
oh my God, what that means for those of you who don't, that means when the priest wanted to do a sermon, he had to pass it by my mom. Right, right. But my mom at 18, she said, spirituality is a personal journey. Go find what you believe. And many years later, I asked her, I said, Mom, why did you become so Catholic? She says, because I had my first out of body experience during a mass. Right. So she had this amazing experience. So for me, it was validating and giving me a foundation of belief below. Right. The reason I could talk about Buddha and Krishna and all and Swaminarayan and all these things is because I did do all that foundational work of trying to back up what I was getting and believing. And then I just slowly started just talking to people, not doing any work per se, but I slowly started just letting it come through. And then what happened was somebody wrote a book about me. And
How
I
did
don't,
that happen?
well, she was the first psychic. And she wanted to write a book about me. And I don't necessarily promote that book for various reasons, but she wrote a book about the story of us meeting. It's if you want to find it, it is available. It's on Amazon. It's called John of Old, John of New. And she wrote this whole story. And that book ended up becoming something where I started doing a book tour. And I got invited to speak at the associate Edgar Cayce's house. And I spoke at Unity churches and metaphysical centers all over the country. And I just started doing it speaking. I had no other thing. Well, the more I spoke, the more people wanted to have private time. And then it got to the point now where I started just really putting myself out there for whoever I could help. Because I was thinking of myself as someone who had this information. It would be completely wrong of me not to share it. It would be morally incomprehensibly wrong for me to not share what I was experiencing. And so I just started sharing. And then I started doing private sessions. Then I started seeing people heal themselves. And I mean, really seriously, I had a woman show up one time with the size of a grapefruit on the side of her face, swelling in her jaw, teeth coming. And by helping her come to her own personal belief, I watched that swelling go away. Right. And I was like, now understand, I'm not a healer. Please don't, that's not what I'm saying. Right. I in that moment, I was a facilitator. I helped her find her belief, her faith. But all healing comes from the faith of the person being healed. And it is your faith that heals you. So I was able to witness these things. And I realized, look, I can really help people empower themselves and come to this. So then I started doing it more and more and more and more. Now my goal, well, hang on, let me say this. So this was great. I was speaking all over the place. And then I started going, the tour kept going, and I kept coming back to the same places. And I started realizing the people that were coming to see me were coming back with the same stories over and over again. They weren't really getting the message at that time. This was back in the early 2000s. And they were too invested in the past life story than the lesson I was teaching. So I said, I need to find a way to get the lesson out, but not the story out. So what I did was I took all of the teachings that I had, the beliefs that I had, the creation that I had, and I wrote it into a corporate motivational speech, and I left spiritual work altogether. And I went into the corporate world sharing this information without them knowing I was sharing it for about 10 years. Manifestation, goal setting, and achievement. But I talk about the faith and the belief. I used to break it down to an alliteration. Fearlessly focus with faith, follow through with flexibility. And I did that for 10 years. It did very well, but it never felt real. It never felt authentic to me, because I think hiding a part of yourself really limits you and what your impact. And I did great during that time. But then the greatest blessing of my life was called COVID-19. When you're a corporate motivational speaker, you go into small rooms with large numbers of people. So that career went away like overnight, right? So during COVID, I decided it's time to see if it's time to come back. And well, somebody I interviewed for the corporate work, I was also a spiritual person. I said, let's start a podcast. So we started this podcast called Spirit Cafe Podcast, and we did a bunch of things. And I ended up interviewing a pretty well-known psychic on, or intuitive, she would call herself, on YouTube, called Kim Carey. She has a channel called Intuitive View. And we interviewed her. And during that interview, I had still not come out. I had still not mentioned anything about past lives or anything. During the interview, she said something, and it just kind of was an offhanded remark. I said, yeah. I said, I had a reincarnation story. It was pretty, fairly well-known name. And I kind of blew it off. We get off the Zoom call with her, and she says, John, tell me more about this reincarnation thing. And you know how you get smacked in the back of the head with the cosmic 2x4? I just told her the entire story. So about 3 days later, she contacts me. She says, John, I want to bring you on my channel and do an interview about reincarnation. He says, you don't have to share anything you don't want to share. I was like, right. So finally I said, okay. And about 2 days before that interview, I said, am I supposed to do this? Now, at this point, I had gotten to the point where I would exhale with a question and I would get answers, right? So I was really bringing information through in a much clearer way. And I was told flat out, it's time. And I want to share a synchronistic story with this, because when I was doing the work in the early 2000s, I had the website johnofnew.com, and I had the email address john@johnofnew.com, right? I had gotten rid of all that. I got rid of the domain. I got rid of the emails. I gotten rid of all of it. And I do this interview with Kim Carey. So the day before, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm doing this, I better have a website. I better have a YouTube channel. So the day before, I built a website, stuck it up. I went on and I started a YouTube channel and recorded 3 videos so that there'd be 3 videos for people to see when they got there. We did the interview. It went live. The next day I had 300 subscribers. It was like, boom, overnight. But I get an email. I get this weird email. And it's like, I'm looking at it. Something about the email looks strange, because it's a reply. It's a reply to john@johnofnew.com. I just opened this new email account back up yesterday, right? This woman had gone to a psychic in Hawaii, and the psychic literally said to her, like the week earlier, she says, you need to find John. He's a big bald man with glasses. He was John the Beloved Apostle, and he's got information for you. So she said, well, I saw him years ago in Pennsylvania, but he's disappeared. We don't know where he is. So she goes back into her old emails from way back, from like all those years ago, and she finds deep in her computer a email chain that we had done 15 years earlier. She clicked reply. Now, there's no way it should have found me. There's no way it should have found me. But it was like the day after that interview. And now I'm Alex Ferrari picked me up, and all these people are picking me up. In 2 years, I've got 1,300 videos on that channel, and I've got I just crossed 19,000 subscribers. It's meant to be for me right now. So and I think the more authentic you are, and the more free with your experience to the world you are, the more the world, the universe, God, consciousness, yada yada, whatever you want to call it, rewards you. I think that the world around you is a reflection of your belief, and when you're putting out that I'm just being me and I love being me, the world loves you. It comes back to you that way.
I'd like to interject real quick and ask a question, because you're really leading into it. And that is that transformation that you can have inside yourself when you find that path, when you finally step into that path of, yeah, this really fits. Yeah, this is who I am. Yeah, this is what I have to share.
Yeah.
And that growing confidence in taking a journey that maybe 5 years, 10 years ago might have been unthinkable.
Absolutely. And I still today ask, give me an answer, right? I literally, and what I do is I've taken to automatic writing. And let me tell you why I've taken to automatic writing. So now I've come back, people are still in lockdown from COVID. And I'm like, well, how can I help people? And I'm basically being pushed to do private sessions via Zoom. I'm like, well, how do you do that? I had always done them in person years ago. How do you do it? No clue. And I was told, sit down before your session and just write. And so I would sit down, I'd write the person's name on top of a sheet of paper, I'd exhale, and a page of information comes through for them. And, trust is developed by results over time. So the first time I did it, I said, okay, I'll just try this out, right? And see how it goes. And it went really well, right? Now, 2 years later, I've done over 600 private sessions. Each one of them had a private writing done for it. And they've been great. I mean, they really have. And what's interesting, like most people will come for it to a psychic for a reading. I don't consider myself psychic in that way, because a lot of people who consider themselves psychics are talking about the future. They're talking about, this is what's going to happen. These are the things I see for you. Da, 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 da. I'm very present. I'm about, these are the things in the here and now that will get you to whatever you want to create. I'm about bringing people to their divinity rather than having them, feeding them what might happen in the future. Because I have a real belief, you never leave your present moment. It sounds weird to say that, but you set goals in the future, but you never get to the future. You can't go to the store next Thursday right now. That goal that you've set is coming towards you. So time is coming to you, and creation is coming to you. So what is coming to you? Your belief about this moment. The Buddha said, what you think you become, you create your world. Krishna said, you're the culmination of your thought. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Shakespeare said, there's nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so, right? You have all this belief, right? And so it always comes back to, what do you believe about the present moment? So my sessions are really about breaking people free of needing something outside of themselves to tell them what the future is going to be, and bringing them back to the place of creating their future, creating their experience, and coming to this realization that they are the pinpoint of creation of their life. And when they come back to that sort of thing, and it's for me, like you were saying, I had to develop that trust that I could do that. I had to develop trust. And the way, as I said, trust is developed by results over time. And I've seen amazing results over time.
And that's such a testament to just start.
Just start, exactly.
Just start. And it's like, I've done that myself. It's like I'm looking at a journey, I'm thinking, I can't do that. That's so complicated. Right. It's just the first step and then the next step. And when you're following your guidance, it just moves. It becomes a go, go, go kind of thing instead of a stress kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm a big movie buff, and there's a guy, Sylvester Stallone. Most people don't know it. He wrote 36 of the movies he was in. And
I didn't know that.
I did not know that, right? And somebody asked him one time, how can you be such a prolific writer? And, Rocky.
He doesn't strike me as the writer type.
Really, he says, the way you do it, he says, you just sit down and write. The first thing you write's going to suck, but you're going to get better, and it's going to be edited. And eventually you're going to get to the point where you write better from the first. And I think that's the greatest advice ever. If you feel you have a gift, if you feel your clarity, and you can share with somebody and empower someone to step into theirs, just go out and try it. The idea of this present moment thing, the past is a collection of present moment memories. The future is just a place where we set goals. So the key isn't to create a gigantic successful outcome. The key is to make one successful present moment. It's to make this present moment get stacked in your subconscious mind, and this present moment get stacked in your subconscious mind, until your subconscious mind is filled with all these beautiful, successful present moments. So now your present moment belief is, I'm successful, I'm creative. And so now what's happening is that future that's coming to you, that's about to surround your experience, is going to be successful because you're making every successful moment. That idea that it's coming towards you and surrounding you, in the first lines of the book of John. By the way, that's the best darn book in the Bible. Thank you very much.
Good work. Good work, thanks. My friend.
Anyway, in the beginning is the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Your words, your thoughts, your beliefs go out to God, and God shows you that belief in the reflection around you. We are literally created in God's image, right? So it's a matter of, what you're seeing in the world is the reflection of you and the collective consciousness, because we are all one. So to give it a really weird example, so I'm living in Akron, Ohio right now, and I'm here because of circumstances with my former wife and my son. I'm here for my son, and that's the sole reason I'm in Ohio. I'm from a beach resort, and I really want to be back at a beach resort, right? So here I am. My son is now off to college. He's 6'4". He likes to put his arm on my head, right? And it's at a point now where I'm ready to move back to the beach, right? Now I'm sitting here in a beautiful little studio in my house. And if I look out this window to my left, right across the street, there's this beautiful little brick rancher. And that beautiful little brick rancher, it's a cute little house. Now, did I create that house in my illusion of belief? No. The architect did, the builder did, the people who bought and paid for that house did. That's their collective consciousness being shown to me across the street. So now my son's off at college, and I've decided that I want to go back to the beach, that I don't want to live here anymore, and I'm moving back to the beach. What happened across the street? My neighbor put a blue roof on that little brick rancher. It is now a very unattractive house right across from my house, right? And so my collective consciousness put a blue roof on that house because it's just not a pleasant place for me anymore, right? So it really comes down to understanding that we are all one in our collective consciousness work. I had the experience one time of, this is going to sound so strange. I talked myself out of an armed robbery. This is back in the days of the early internet, and we used to go to the library to do our emails. And I'd go in, I was with my friend Charles, and he was over there doing his, and I finished early. So I went out to my truck, and I got in my truck, and as I got in my truck, my side door opened up, and a guy jumped in the car and locked the door, pulled the gun.
Oh.
And I exhaled. I said, how can I help you today, my friend? You know, we're all in this life thing together, and you obviously look like you need some help. What can I do for you? And he looked at me kind of weird. He says, are you Christian? I said, in the oldest sense of the word, which made me laugh. And I just started talking to him. How can I help you? You need something? What can I do for you? I ended up loaning him money. I ended up driving him to his uncle's house. No issue. He could have gone much differently. But instead of it going differently, I had a beautiful conversation with this guy. And it always comes down to, if you are fearful, you're going to have a fearful result, because that's your present moment belief. When I directed the Tennessee Renaissance Festival many years ago, I had an entertainer who I loved his act. He was part of a music group which I just adored called the Minstrels of Mayhem. And I was, on opening weekend, I had directed the fair. I wrote whatever that word is. I wrote all the scripts, and I'd really done like a lot of work to put the show together, and tried to make sure everybody had good time slots. And I'm walking past his stage on the opening day, and he comes running out. And he was a big guy, bigger than me, actually. And he comes out and he puts his finger about an inch from my nose. And he says, you mother effer, but he didn't say effer, right? And he starts screaming and yelling and getting in my face. And the second he came up, I exhaled. Now, by not succumbing to a fear-based response, what I did was I shut off my own fear response, my own reaction. I would call that turning the other cheek, not living into his experience. Because I exhaled, I was not in a fear state. My mind was clear. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But so here he is in front of me. He's yelling, he's screaming, he's hollering. And I'm like, what's he afraid of? Because all negative emotions come from a fear base. So he's blah, 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 blah. Suddenly I realized he's just afraid of not making enough money. Now, because I wasn't feeding him, I didn't step back in defense or forward in offense. I just stood there with no movement in any direction. He ran out of things to say because I wasn't feeding him. Finally, he finishes. I go, Jerry, I'm so sorry you're having this experience. Nothing was done intentionally against you. How would you like to solve it? And he stormed off.
You didn't want to play.
Well, 10 minutes later, he comes back and he says, John, I'm sorry. I was just mad. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Right? If I lean into that fear, if I lean into his stuff, actors on Broadway are trained that if they're on stage and they forget all their lines, the first thing they're supposed to do is exhale and relax all their muscles, and all their lines rush right back into their heads. Mm-hmm. And the reason this is because when you're holding that air in out of fear, your body goes into survival mode. Air becomes more important than anything else, especially more important than the lines on a page. So you exhale and you turn it back off. By exhaling, when he came up to me that day, I was able to go, what's he afraid of? Because I was thinking in that and not investing into the reaction. I call it being an action hero rather than a reaction zero. Yeah.
Let's take this concept and zoom it out, because we're on a planet Earth right now at the moment that's just swimming in fear.
Yeah.
Where did we go so wrong? How did this all get out of, it almost looks out of control to me.
I want to flip your perspective if I can.
Okay.
Can I flip your perspective?
Please, yes.
Socrates said, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. So I can tell you from having done that work in the early 2000s to going away from it and coming back to it now, there are more people awakening right now on this planet than ever before. There are more people empowering themselves than ever before. And what you're seeing is the negative people getting better press. Is what you're seeing is the negative people getting better press. If you really look at the people who are being so loud right now, you ask them for, well, what's the solution? What are you bringing to the table to make the world better? And all they can say is, we're just stopping those people because they're bad.
Yeah.
Right?
But the press focusing on that portion is intentional.
Yeah. But do you know that the world is predominantly positive anyway?
Yeah.
So to give you a weird example, I live in Akron, Ohio. If I had a 9-to-5 job in Cleveland, I would be commuting about 35 to 40 minutes one way. So if I had that job every day, I would pass 1,000 cars on the road to and from every day. Maybe every day, possibly every day, I might see an accident on the side of the road or somebody, the fender bender or something. But, not every day, but let's just say every day. So every day, someone's on the side of the road. Tonight on the news is going to say, there's a car on the side of the road that had an accident. It's terrible, horrible, horrible. What's the number one story should have been 999 cars made it safely to their destination and back with no problem. The world is predominantly positive. What we're getting is the people focusing on the negative now. And there are more of us who focus on the positive. There are more of us who are just living our lives. It just seems bad because they're louder. They're slandering. And that fear-based, if you succumb to it, then you're part of the problem. What I have discovered from those 20 years ago to now is I was blown away when I came back to this work. Because like I said, I was in the corporate world for almost 10 years. And coming back to this work and seeing the change in humanity for the better has been incredible. And the fact that someone like Dan McClellan can go out and debunk the Bible openly is interesting. My channel, John of New, my goal is to put out something that comes from love every day, right? But it's fascinating to me is, so if I put out a video and it gets 1,000 views, I'm going to get probably about 400 or 500 likes on that video. And I'm going to get like 2 dislikes. And the 2 who are disliking it might send me a comment calling me the Antichrist or a false prophet.
The devil, yeah.
Or the devil.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I'm, delivering love and you're afraid of it. Right. So I tend to look at the world from a really positive point of view. And I just really think of the crap that we're inundated with as just slanders. The debate is lost. They're losing.
The debate is lost and they're getting a little frantic.
Yeah. And that's the way I hope that helped you flip your script.
Well, I agree with you completely. And it's it's kind of like the final throes of a belief system that no longer works for us. We don't want to play anymore. And it's not even like, the difference for me, John, is it's like I'm not even angry, or it doesn't even ruffle my feathers. It's just boring at this point. It's like, can we just move on? We've done this. We've played this. It's silly. Let's move forward with something fun.
Well, when you're a ship at sea, a big giant cargo ship at sea, if they decide they need to change direction, they turn the wheel. It takes several miles for that boat to start turning, but somebody has to turn the wheel first. Yeah. And I think that's what we're all doing. People like you who with your channel, me with my channel, with the work that we're doing, I think we're turning the wheel.
Yeah.
And the boat will turn and it will go to this new, brighter destination. But you have to turn it slowly. Now, here's something that's fascinating. The most damaging thing in the world to me is actually religion, because
that's a whole topic right there. So where are you at with that right now?
I have no religion. I'm not Christian. I'm not any of those things. And in fact, the reason I want to brought that up is because over the past 20 years, the Christian churches have lost 54% of their congregations.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And so the boat is turning. The boat is turning and people are falling away. There's just south of me here in Akron, there's a Metaphysical Center that used to be, it's going to be really interesting. The Metaphysical Center was the choir loft of a Catholic church. It was a really strange setup. They had put a wall up. The Catholic Church was renting it out because they couldn't keep their doors open if they didn't have that rented out. So the Metaphysical Center was upstairs, and downstairs was the Catholic congregation. I spoke there several times, did sessions there several times, did a whole bunch of stuff there. And over the course of time, the downstairs congregation was dwindling and dwindling and dwindling and dwindling, right?
And upstairs,
Upstairs was growing and growing and growing. And when it got down to the last core people, then graffiti started showing up on the walls upstairs. Satan worshipers, all this stuff. The last core holders on started slandering, started getting evil and mean. And that's where we are. The last core people who aren't going are just really blowing up right now. And what happened next was, if you drive down there now, that building is closed and boarded up. The Metaphysical Center bought a building, and they have like ongoing classes and all this stuff. The church is gone. And I think that, religion-wise, I think religions are, like I said, man's idea of creating a construct around these amazing people who found their divinity. But I think God is too big to be encompassed by anyone in school of thought or religion. And I find the teachings that I talk about, being very present, being very fearless, to choose to what you're believing about this moment. So you go back to Star Wars, the movie Star Wars, right? Do or do not, there is no try.
I love that line. Thank you. Yeah.
It's a great line, right? Do or do not, there is no try. That's saying I'm taking my present moment and I'm not wasting it on trying. I am creating it. He also said, named must your fears be, before banish it you can. Named must your fears be. You have to say it. That is a fear. And you release that fear and you banish it, right? So it comes back to this idea of understanding what you're saying and believing about your present moment and changing that experience. But you find that in that structure. You find that in Lord of the Rings. Gandalf says, all you need to do is decide what to do with the time you're given. And so you decide what you're doing. You create it into your experience and you let it surround you. And so you can find truth everywhere because God is everywhere. And to try to encompass it into a religion, that's the reason why Christianity became the deadliest religion in the world. Most people don't realize it is, but it's the deadliest religion in the world. The things that were done in the name of Christianity. I like to bring this up. The most famous baptized Catholic was Adolf Hitler, right? And during World War II, the Pope and several of the great bishops of the Catholic Church sided with him, right? So when you look at it from those kind of perspectives, you start to realize that there's beautiful things in the Bible. I've been quoting it the whole time we've been talking, right? There's beautiful, loving things in the Bible. There's also beautiful, loving things in the Bhagavad Gita and the Quran. Muhammad says, "He who knows not kindness has no faith." If you put on your love goggles and you start reading, you'll find God, and you'll find it in Marvel movies and Star Wars and Shakespeare. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. You have this idea that it's everywhere, and the world itself is your oneness with God. It's a matter of you exhaling and simply feeling it.
This has been a beautiful conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I hope you'll come back sometime.
Oh, anytime. You just let me know.
Yeah.
I enjoyed talking to you too. I know I get verbose, so.
No, I love it. But before we go, I want to talk about what you're doing now, how people can find out more about you,
Okay.
maybe get involved with you. Share with us what is going on in the world of John of New.
Okay. Well, my big thing right now is I'm dedicating my life to helping people in some form. My YouTube channel puts out a daily video. I also have a second YouTube channel literally called The Recovering Catholic. And so I'm putting those out so people have some daily inspiration or daily empowerment, motivation. I do private sessions with people, which is you can find on my website, johnofnew.com. And you'll find that I sent a link to you in this email today, that if your listeners want a discount on those readings, there's a link in there to do that if they want to do that. But I dedicate, and just to give you guys an idea of how committed I am to this work, I do 4 12-hour days a week doing nothing but private sessions. I do 2 days of just making videos, and then I take Sunday off to do my laundry. Right? So I am working around 70 hours a week right now doing what I do, just because I think it's important. I think it's bringing people to their own power within, showing they can create their experience, and helping them break free of their fears.
Yeah.
So that's what I do now.
Wonderful. And I'll have all that information linked in the description box down below. It'll be easy to find. John, thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.